Hey. Ooh, it's dark in my house, huh? Actually, I'm at the bridge here. I'm a Star Trekking. My virtual background is dark. How's everybody? Did you have a good weekend? Did you get the Unit 3 exam done okay? I think everybody did. Good, good. It's hard to remember to come to class, isn't it? You guys are doing so good. Hard to remember. I complained all weekend about my whole life just being talking to black squares. You guys are black squares with personality, but it's still kind of weird. I'm gonna shut off this video so I'll just be a black square. Make it go back to normal. I was wondering if anybody would show us their survey form this morning to get started. See some awesome ones. Yay, let's see it. Oops, that was fast. Did it crash?
Okay, sorry, I shared just one thing. I needed to share everything.
Oh, no problem.
Let's see here, let's close that. So I lived in Germany for a while, and in Germany they have an airline called Ryanair, where a lot of flights cost less than $100.
Uh-huh.
In fact, most of them range about 20 to 30.
I
So,
heard of it when my daughter was there.
mhm. And so this right here is for a trip through Ryanair, right? And you see there's a whole host of destinations. The top 8 of their 2020 places to be in 2020, right? And all of them are default checked. There's 3 different business types, though really with Ryanair there's only one, and it's economy, but I had to have radio buttons. You can select tickets up to, I think, 25. Yep. We deselect some of these. We don't want to go everywhere. I mean, who wants to pay that much? And let's leave May 20th. I even have the little copyright at the bottom. Now we can
Nice.
clear it. All of these get rechecked, set back to economy tickets, even the date.
Very nice.
So then let's just do this for 2 tickets. And there we go. Thank you for choosing Ryanair. Tickets, destinations, ticket class, departure date, and the total for the 2 tickets.
Very nice. Woohoo! I'm going to give him a Zoom hand here. Let me find it. Sometimes it's hard to find. It's buried. That looks really nice.
So the Ryanair is a picture box. I built it in Photoshop because I was having an issue with how Visual Studio was putting this image, this logo next to the word. So I just circumvented that. And then all
Right.
these pictures are pictures I've taken in Europe.
Wow, they're beautiful. That's
So
nice.
we have like Colosseum. Here's the Fountain of Neptune in Rome. Big Ben. This is, I can't say it. It's a city in Morocco. You have the Berlin Gate, Berg Alps. This right here is in Pompeii, and it's the picture of Alexander you see in all of the textbooks.
Uh-huh.
These 2 are from Trier. It's a gate in Germany, and then here's Pompeii as well.
Nice. That reminds me, there's those tours available online. I need to do some of those while we're stuck here. Get out virtually. That's beautiful. Everybody give him a hand. I love it. Let's see your code, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. It's not like it's company secret or anything.
It looks beautiful.
Okay, so I have actually 2 forms, right? The first one is the input form. So I declare a couple of variables here. And then I've built a function that resets everything because I use it in 2 instances, right? And then my input form load, I call that function.
Great.
And when the submit button is clicked, it sets the number of ticket value, right? And that grabs the value from the numeric up down. I have a counter that is increased for each checkbox in the destination group box. And then I have a character that's selected based on the radio button in the group box. And then underneath here, this right here grabs the date in the calendar. And then this right here sends all those values to the output box and shows it.
Beautiful.
And then right underneath it is the final function. And that's the clear button. And once again, it calls that form default function I built. And then the form output, I initialize all of those variables.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use them down here where depending on what that character is, it'll say economy, business, or first class. Then it calculates it and then prints it to the various labels on the output form.
Awesome. It's great. Any questions? Our people here.
Any questions, comments, concerns, or fish?
I think they've got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, first.
Anybody else want to show us their beautiful survey form? I know it's hard to follow that one. Let's see what you've got. Let's see if I have to pick some people here. Oh, yay. I was going to say, I hate to just pick on people when I can't see their faces. Brady's going to go. Yay. Make that thing a little bigger for us, please.
Now can you guys hear me?
Can hear you. Yay.
Yay, selected the right microphone. Okay,
Was
so
that, are you
here's
saying something?
Huh?
I said, what was that? Are you saying something?
He was.
Yeah.
There he is.
Can you guys not hear me now?
We could hear you for a second.
No, I can't. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay.
Okay, you guys can hear me now.
We can hear you.
Okay, so here's my program. I decided to do a favorite animal survey. So you have radio buttons. You can select your favorite animal. And if you select the other box, it gives you a text box where you can enter whatever. So I'm gonna say dodo is my favorite bird. And then for the date, I couldn't really figure out what to do with that. So I just said enter the current date. So you can select the date and then enter your age. So you can enter any, and then you have to select the included answers are true, otherwise it won't let you submit it. So you click that box and hit submit. It says answer submitted, and it shows all your everything you submitted.
Nice.
And then you can hit that and it resets everything. Then you can select something else. I did have a problem where I renamed it. And then something happened between TFS and Visual Studio and it continued to run.
Yeah, it gets mad, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I know from now on, don't rename the file, the folder that the project is in.
TFS is controlling your source, and if you try to mess with it, it thinks you're doing something, you know, unacceptable. So,
Yeah.
looks really good. Can we see your code?
Yes. Oh, that's interesting. I can't find it.
Can't find it. Just look at your form design tab and then just press F7. Is that it? Or is that still the Windows stuff?
Yeah.
Go back to your form design and let's double click on something on your form. Oh,
Ah, there it is. Yes.
see it? Okay.
Oh, I forgot to show you guys this. If you click on the raccoon, it says you click the raccoon.
Nice.
Then here's all the conditionals for the radio buttons.
Very nice.
And I set it to where if the other button is checked, it will cause the text box to be shown and enter your own mall. And here's all the code for the reset button. And this is one of the hardest things to figure out, how to reset the calendar.
Isn't
I
it
found this code
hard?
online. You set the date. Yeah. There's no just like reset button for that reset command.
You guys did good because that one is really difficult to find sometimes. So good job. Any questions for him? Looks awesome. Thank you, sir. Let me give you a hand here. If I can find it, I might still have a hand on. It's always jumping around on me. There it is. Oh yeah, I still had it there, so I'll give you a new one. I'm not so good with it. Yay. Thank you. Anybody else? I think we have time for like one more. If you have any other awesome ones. Looks like our Monday morning is hard on everybody, huh? Not you guys, you're where you're supposed to be. We're missing a few, huh? Hope everybody's okay. They're just sleeping in. Like I said, I know it's hard to get up and get going. Okay, so we don't have any other volunteers that want to show us their beautiful code. Are you sure? Give you a second. Okay, then. I'll share my screen. See what my screen, what number they're feeling like today. I think that Zoom should change the icon when you're sharing your screen so you would know. It sort of does, but not very well. Ah, so it's Monday. I was thinking about Zoom manners. Why? because I had a class last week where somebody was obviously away from the keyboard, kind of took up a little bit of everybody's time trying to figure out where he was, if he was available. So I wanted to remind you about the participant screen on Zoom. Make sure you use it. Clap when people present or show their work. That's what that's for. Use the yes or no icons to show agreement, disagreement. Anybody that's presenting is going to tell you it is so much easier to do if you're getting some sort of feedback from your audience. And with the black square things, not a lot of feedback. So yes, no, hate it, love it, whatever. And use the away icon if you're away from the keyboard. Being really, really generous with attendance. So I know that, you know, if you jump into the session and then go back to bed, just don't jump into the session, okay? Just stay in bed. You can watch the video later, all right? So just, if you have to be away, that's totally understandable. Just use that away icon so that everybody knows that's where you are. I'm gonna quit clapping here. There we go. I got some icons. Just be aware of the fact that other people might be waiting for you. So if you're away, let us know. Can't help it. Sometimes you gotta be. Our last thing for the semester is looking at data files. So just to back up for a second, we use files all the time. Those of you that have been using computers since you were young, you know that all of your data is stored in files, and we can save things to files in our programs ourselves in our C# code, and we can read input from a data file. This is kind of a step before accessing a database, because if we have a text file or a sequential file, then we can have persistent data. And what is persistent data? That is data that stays even if the computer is powered off and back on, right? It's persistent. So if we're working in memory, that is not persistent. And that's what we usually do in C#1, is just work with memory data. So what if we want to save that data? We don't want to have to re-enter everything every time. We're going to use a data file. Our entire system, our Windows system or our Linux system or our iOS system, is built to manage files. We can think of program files versus data files. A program file being something that is either source code or executable code, and a data file being some sort of information that could be processed. So here's an example of a data file. This is from the 120 textbook. So you might have seen it, you might remember it, but let's take a quick look. This file has information about students. For each student, we have multiple pieces of data. So for our Abrams here, we have 4 test scores. For J. Chavez, we have 4 test scores. So each of these rows is information for one student. And each of these rows would be called a record. So a data text file is made up of records. Now on each record, we have the same information. Field 1 is the student's name. Field 2 is their first test score. Field 3, second, etc. So each of these columns, the columnar data, is called a field. And we can name our fields however we want. So records are comprised of fields, and all of the records together are stored in a data file. So what's the biggest thing? A file. The next container is a record, and then a field is the lowest level of information that we usually have in a data file. Now I want you to think back to your early days, your childhood, whenever you were wanting to watch a video. And if you had a VHS, a VCR, it was hard to find your favorite spot? Did you have some of those VHS tapes where multiple things were recorded and you would have to fast forward and rewind to find the exact right spot to start playing the video? That's because a VHS tape is sequential. It just plays the next thing, the next thing, the next thing in sequence. We can't jump around. But if you're old enough to remember when you first got a DVD player, you were able to go directly to a certain spot on a DVD. That's because a DVD, like a hard drive or memory, any sort of digital storage, allows random access. And random access is where I can move to a specific point on the media at my command. Okay, so those things could be important to us in our development, because if we have a limited technology, we need to take that into consideration, right? All right, so we want to read files and write files in our code. We're going to have to follow a specific order. First of all, when we start, we're going to have to open the file. Now, when we open the file, we need to know the file name, right? We have to tell the operating system, I want to open file a.txt, and then that file is going to be associated with our application and opened. The operating system is going to be involved in some of that. Next, in our application, we're going to read a record or try to read a record from that data file. As soon as we try to read, we're going to check the status. Was our read successful, or are we at the end of the file? If we are not at the end of the file, our read was successful, we're going to process that record, like print out the student's name or average their test scores or whatever our processing needs to be. And then in some sort of looping structure, we're going to go back and read another record. We're going to check, is it the end of the file? No, process that record. And we're going to continue that process, read and process, until we finally reach the end of the file. When we reach the end of the file, we're going to close it so that the operating system knows that we're done with it. It's usable by another program, and our processing will be done. So we can think of our data file kind of as a stream, and you'll see that terminology as we look at the textbooks, a data stream. So think about a stream. What are some characteristics? Well, it flows. It's usually continuous. It could be really big, like contain a large amount of information or water, or a small amount. And we could use that data stream, that water stream, to facilitate a process. So we could have a mill, like a flour mill, where we ground the flour. There's a reason mills, old mills, are always beside streams, right? Because they use that water power to move those giant boulders around to grind things up. Or we could have hydroelectric power. We could have a dam or something that harnesses the power of that stream. Well, our data file can be thought of as a stream, kind of in the same way that we can grab a large chunk of data or a small chunk. We can use that data file to facilitate whatever process we want to facilitate. Now, some other things about data files. First of all, we need to be clear on what the path is. The path is the location of a file. So for example, on my C drive, I could have a folder named My Folder. Within that folder, I have another folder named Data. That would be the path. Drive letter, folder, folder. The last part, the file1.txt, that's my file name. So it's part of the complete path and file name specification, right? But it's actually just the file name part. So the file name part is the file name and the extension. So file1.txt, where .txt is the extension. And that always tells us what kind of software is associated with this file, right? So if I'm working with an absolute file name, the absolute path, it always begins with the drive letter. So this is an absolute file name. It tells you how to get to that file, absolutely. There is no question. You go to the C drive, go to that folder, there's the file. Now, a relative path begins with just maybe a folder name, no slashes or backslashes. So for example, if I wanted to say file1.txt is in my current project folder, I would not include any path name information. And that's what I want for a program. In a program, I want a relative file name, just a file name. I might have some path information, like I might say it's in an image folder or it's in a data folder, but I don't ever want to be using an absolute path. If you were to use an absolute path in your code, say that in your final project, you use an image, and in that image, instead of importing it into the project, you use an absolute path to say, here, go find this image. Well, that's fine for you to experiment, but that's not a way to turn it in, because I don't have access to your C drive. I can't go to your computer, to your C drive, to your folders to get that file. So I need a relative path name, just file1.txt, and I can find it in my project folder, just like you could find it in your project folder. It is relative to our current location. So here is a folder list kind of in File Explorer, and this is a project folder, and I just kind of talk about these the whole semester, assuming everybody knows how to do some file management and things like that, because it's important as a software developer to know those kinds of things. So I hope if you weren't really comfortable with that, you are a lot more so now, because we've done some of that a little bit. But we've seen that in a solution folder, we can have multiple projects, and in a project folder, we're going to have our bin file, our OBJ, and our properties. So then we're going to have all of our code, our .cs files, just at the root of our project folder. So where our files are is important. Another term that you'll see when we process files and folders is a buffer. And I think everybody knows what a buffer is. Netflix and stuff, you know that a buffer is a temporary location that's being used to hold a data stream as it's being input or output. So we're getting that data, that Netflix data across the network, and we're putting it in a buffer to be read from by our video viewer. And that puts us ready to write our own. Before we do that, let's take a look at the textbooks here. In the C# Pro textbook, the one that, the black and gold book, chapter 20, the first half of chapter 20 talks about reading and writing sequential files, string writers and string readers, and binary writers and binary readers. And then it starts getting into more advanced topics about data serialization that are covered in C# 2. So it really is just the first half of the chapter. Now, as an alternative, we can go to the Doyle PDF. I'm going to bring that up here. And chapter 13 in the Doyle PDF is the one that will be our go-to here. I'm going to search for that. And I have to go up to the top, right? It's finding all sorts of them. I was at the right spot and then I moved. Look at it, I'm going crazy with it. Page numbers. I'm just going to reopen it because I'm just in the wrong place. Let's try that. Now I can search for chapter 13. I know it's not a very friendly PDF. Finally, sorry about that. Technical difficulty on my part. Chapter 13 in the Doyle PDF talks about reading and writing to and from files. Some of the videos that are available online that are linked to Canvas should follow along with some of these examples pretty closely. We'll do some of the others too, so that you get some different examples, right? I want you to have some different examples. Basically, when we're working with files and folders in our C# programs, we're going to be referring to class libraries that are held in the system.io namespace. So we're going to usually need a using clause for system.io. The first thing we want to look at are some of the classes that have to do with files and folders themselves. Now, way back in the early days, they called folders directories. And then as time went on, they said, you know, we treat directories just like folders. And someone said, well, why don't you just call them folders? And they were like, oh, okay, we'll do that. But we still see a lot of older things like commands and stuff that refer to folders as a directory, but it's just a folder. And then we have some other classes that have to do with working with files and all sorts of different classes that are available to us. Whenever we look at the structure of the system.io information, we can see that many of the class libraries are dependent or depend on others. So we have some, you know, IO binary reader and binary writer that are base objects. So notice that those are ones that can kind of get in there and do whatever they want. We can make them do things. And then this object-oriented type IO contains all of the streams and buffer type classes that we'll use. All right, so let's write a little program that can give us some information about a file. This is going to be a console-based application, and we haven't written one of those in a very long time. Now we have this file here, birdofparadise.jpg. I actually have that file. Let me find it for you. We don't have to use it, but it's nice for this particular activity for us to all use it, just because it can, then we know we all got the same thing. Let me see if I can send it. Okay, I just put it in the chat. So it's on the way anyways. There you go. Grab that one. Now just save that somewhere. Whoops. I don't know if I sent that to everyone. Hang on. Let me try that again. That looks better. It had a limited audience there at first. That's not what we want. And we can use this file for a couple of different things. So I've got my Bird of Paradise file. Let's go ahead and open a project. And for this one, I'd like to create a solution that has a couple of different projects in it because we want some file handling things kept together. So I'm going to say this is a new project. It's going to be a console app, and I'm going to use .NET Framework. And I'm going to name this Chapter 13 Files and Directories. Notice right here, my checkbox says create new Git repository instead of add to source control. So I'm assuming I have lost my connection to TFS. So I would need to reconnect. If anybody's ending up with those Git problems, don't forget we have that solution posted in our TFS channel on Discord so that you can find that. I'm happy to help if you have trouble with that. Okay, this first one, we're going to do what they were looking at here in the PDF. And what we're going to do is look at our directory structure. So we're going to use some file and directory utility classes because sometimes we need to know if a file exists, make sure that it's really there. So we know that we're going to need to add our using statement for system.io. I'll go ahead and get rid of all of these others except for system. And then in our main, we're going to set up a file name string. So as we're working here, you're going to see this file name is really important, right? Can't do much with the file without its name. You have to match everything exactly. So case, and file type and all those kinds of things must be perfect. Let me get my screen set here. I moved things around. All right. Now, the file that I'm looking for is this Bird of Paradise file. There's lots of ways that I could get it into my project, but we're not going to worry about that yet because we want to see, some errors and things before we get it all working properly. So right now, I've got that Bird of Paradise file out in my file system, but I don't have it anywhere locally in this project to be found. I'm going to say that's the file name I'm concerned with. So I'm going to do an if statement. Now I'm going to use the file class and I'm going to say, hey, using the file class, does this file exist? Now, first thing, I can tell right off the bat. Oh, do you not see it? I sent it to, sorry, I sent it to the chat on Zoom. I'll send it to Discord. Too many places. I did not send it to Discord. Okay, now it's on Discord too. It's beautiful. We can send it everywhere. It's this pretty Hawaii flowers. I didn't know that those were Bird of Paradise until this book. My Coke. Sounds suspicious. Okay, so are you finding it? Everybody got it okay? Yay. Okay, so if our file exists, we can do something with it. Now, some things. First of all, file.exists. That's a static method, isn't it? We didn't have to instantiate an instance of a file object. We just used the file class name and said, using the file class, look at the exists method. Let's run it. I want to know if the file with this file name exists. Now, if that file exists, let's do some things. We'll do our long console.write line. And we've got a lot of parameters here, so I'm going to do those interpolated strings with the $sign because otherwise things are going to get really ugly on us. So the first thing is our actual file name variable. IntelliSense is being annoying. Okay, so the first thing we're going to print out is for file name, our file name. And for the next line, we're going to print the attributes. And we'll look at those in a minute. Now, for our attributes, or attributes, depending on what part of the country you're from, we're going to use the file class and call the getAttributes method. Again, we need to pass in our file name so that this command knows what file we're referring to. Next, we're going to output the created date of the file. We're going to use the file class's get creation time. And then last access. We could interrogate any of the methods that you see. The file class. We're going to use this get last access time for our file. Now let's do an else. Because like in our case, we don't expect our file to be found. We haven't done anything yet to get it into a position where it can be located. This example that will also give us a really good opportunity to do some try-catch logic, because so far we've only done that kind of on your own. We'll actually implement some, and it kind of makes more sense when we're working with files. So we're going to say file name, start out our message this way, not found, using current and then we're going to say we're using the current directory. And then we're going to go ahead, since we're doing a console app, and console.read key. so we can look at it. So if I run this right now, I should get an error, right? Because I don't have that bird of paradise file in my project. Let's make sure. And yep, I get the error, bird of paradise not found using current directory. My extra colon there is a little weird. I'll get rid of it. So how can I make it be found? What if I copy that file into my project folder? Here's my file, my bird of paradise. Can I just drop it in there? What are you upset about? This file comes from an untrusted source. Do you want to load it? Yes. Nice, it just opened it. It didn't actually put it in my project. So I'm going to close that. So I could copy and paste, right? Let's try it. I'm bound and determined. Ah, now I've got it in my project. Will that run? Still doesn't see it. Whenever we're working with files, we're going to be looking at the currently executing folder in our system. So we can change our view. Let me delete this bird of paradise here because it's not doing any good. So I'm just going to delete it instead of trying to move it. And what I need to do is find my bin debug folder. That's the folder that my project is executing from. So if I put the file in that folder, it will get found. But I don't see my bin debug folder. So if I change my view from solutions to folder view, then I can expand. There's my debug folder and my new program's executable. So I need to put that file into my bin debug. Now it's in there. Now, one thing to be aware of though, is that whenever you upload to TFS, when you check in, your bin debug folder is not copied to TFS. So you might have to make some sort of special arrangements for that. All right, let's run now that we've got our bird of paradise saved in our project folder. Notice that my start run button is different than normal. That's because of this view. Since I'm in this folder view, I'm not really able to run my project. So I'm going to switch back to my solution. And now I can run. Be really careful of that, switching that view, because it can get you messed up to where you think nothing is working. Now it sees my file. It's like, oh yeah, I see that file name. It's the bird of paradise. It's attributes our archive. It was created today and last accessed today because I copied it into my bin debug folder. That worked for everybody? Let you read your file. Troubles? Now, a couple of other things to look at. We also could go to File Explorer and we could put that bird of paradise file into the required folder. that way. If you right-click on your solution and open folder in File Explorer, that'll open your project in File Explorer, just like it says, and then I could go into my project bin, debug folder, and find my Bird of Paradise JPEG. Now, what is the absolute path of that file? Well, up here it is. It's kind of messy though. So if I click up here, I can see that that's on my C drive, in my users folder, my Renee Riley folder, source repos, and then I can get that absolute full path name. Now, another thing I can do up here is if I select everything, I can type CMD to bring up a command prompt in that folder. So I'll type CMD right there. I do a dir command, a directory, and I see that I'm looking at my bin debug folder. I have the Bird of Paradise file, and my chapter 13 files and directories and all that kind of stuff. Looks like I was getting different attribute dates though, huh? No, I'm not seeing that archive attribute. I can say dir-a. Nope. /a. Sometimes you forget which character to use. Still didn't give me attributes. Let me do a question mark and say, how in the world do I get attributes? Oh, uppercase A. dir/uppercase A. Still isn't giving them to me. I can use that attribute switch to specify which files I want to see. So I could say, oh, I want to see the ones that are hidden. Our Bird of Paradise just has an archive attribute set, which just means it hasn't been backed up. So we can look at those attributes and see things. I'm going to exit out of the command prompt. It is kind of handy that we can select up here and get that absolute path. I'm sitting there on the command prompt path, huh? A little wacky. All right, so we can do some command prompt things and navigate and see how stuff works. Let's look at the directory class. Right here, we were looking at files, but we can also look at some information about directories, the folders. So there's lots of different classes that are available. Let me show you this. The directory class allows us to create a directory or a folder, delete one, see whether the folder exists. So sometimes we need to create folders to manage the information in our application or to do other things. So we have that capability. And then we have some other classes, the file info and directory info classes, that add additional functionality. If we use those, we are not using the static classes. Then we need to actually create instances, like a file instance. But then we can refer to that repeatedly. So just a little bit different. Let's do this one. This one, we're going to look at all of the files in a folder. So let's create a new project. In my solution, I want to right click and create a new project. And let's call this one Files in Folder. We need system.io. So in this one, we're going to actually use the directory info class to create an instance. So that file class that we were using earlier is a static class. We didn't have to create a new instance, but the directory info class is instance oriented. We're going to call that instance dir and say it's a new directory info instance. We're going to pass it a dot, which kind of means the current directory. In command prompt world. Now, once we've created that instance, we can actually see, well, what is our current directory? He was doing all sorts of weird stuff, you know, typing around and everything. Is there a better way to find it? Now I'm going to make this dynamic, and what we want to display after that current directory line is going to be using the base directory class that is static. It's not the directory info class that's not static, but using the static class, let's get it. That current directory, get current directory. I see that closing curly brace for that parameter. There we go. Okay, so our interpolated string, we're going to output current directory and then go to a new line and run the get current directory command of the directory class. I think that we would like to go to a new line. After that is output. So here, and so using the directory class, which is a static class, we're going to get the current directory. We established what the current directory was using a dot for the directory info, because a dot means current directory in command prompt syntax. Next, let's write out some information about our file name. It says to do this pod write for 52 plus size pod write for 10 It does not like, oh, there we go. Just need to have a closing double quote there. Messy. All right, so we're going to have our file name in a 52 column display, plus our size in a 10 column display, plus creation time. So this is like a heading. We're getting it all set up to display all of the information for all of the files in our folder. So for each file in our directory, dir. Now in our directory instance, we should be able to find a method to get files. There it is, get files. So we're basically saying for each file in this directory, now whenever we do the get files, we have to pass in a wildcard to say what files would you like to get. Well, we would like to get all files, so we're going to do a star.star to get all of the files. We're going to set up a string to hold each file name. We're going to set up a long variable to hold the length, fil. Notice we're looking at properties of our fil object that was created as we got each file. We're going to set up a date time object and set that equal to the creation time property of our file object. And finally, we're going to write out all of this information. Now in our write line, I'm going to do it the way they do because it is so messy. I'll get it all mangled up if I try to change it to interpolated. We can afterwards, but all right. Our next parameter, parameter 1, we want it to take up 12 columns or spaces or something. And then it's going to be a numeric with no decimal places. And then the next parameter, we're going to say that should take up 20 columns. And it's a date. So the G is a date formatting. Now, what do we want as replacements? First of all, our name. But we want to pat it to the right. 45. Next, we want our size and our creation time. So this right line up here, set up a heading line for each of our files as we output the information about each of the files in our folder. So we should be able to run this. Let's go ahead and set up a read key. And then try to run it. Okay, so it says my project is not the right one. Let me set this new one, files and folders, to be the active project. Set a startup project, and of course I can change that in other ways, but I'll just do it that way. Oop, got mad at me. Input string was not in a correct 4.
I think you forgot a closing bracket.
Ah, there it is. Thank you. Whoops. Better stop running. Thank you. All right. Get it? Does it look good? Yay. Okay, so we just listed all the files in the folder. We see their size and when they were created. So everybody got the same thing? We're looking at different things. Looking good. Now, if I wanted to change things on this, we have the power. So say I wanted to list all of the files in my C drive, which I don't want to, but I'm going to. I would put before the first star, C:\\. Now, am I going to need 2? Because backslash is a special character to C#. Yup. So I'm going to need 1 is an escape character, and the next one is the actual character that gets passed through. So now that should list all of the files in my C drive. I don't have a lot. Whoops, it's mad at me. Oh. Would be better if I could just use a folder name. Let's try it without a. Yeah, I'm still running. See if it'll let me do it with just C:\. It does. Those backslashes get everything so confused. Nope, still mad at me. Must not be a drive. Oh, it won't let me do a whole drive. So could I do my documents folder? It's just going to be very restrictive to us. What I could do, let's back up one. So let's say instead of doing our current folder, we let that repair itself. I would be better off if I would do that up here where we're establishing our directory info. So that's where we're establishing our directory object. Can we do the root there? I'm getting rid of the dot. I'm saying I want my C drive to be my current folder. It didn't rebuild, so I'm going to build this thing. Just too small of a change. The compiler did not think it was worthy of being rebuilt. It still doesn't like me. I'm going to do build. Build files in folder. Still just looking at the, oh, do I need silly thing? So it must not like that because it's just defaulting to what I already have. So we have definitely some limits on what kind of locations we can use. Now the dot, again, represents our current folder. So you can try some different things and see what you can do. If you put in a complete path, you'll be able to get the information about the files in that path. So try some things, experiment with it. We have lots and lots of different ways that we can get data and examine the files and folders that we use. We don't have to do it super often, really, because a lot of times we're using data stores and other data, databases. So what if we want to actually read and write a file? We want some things to happen in our application depending on that file content. Well, let's write this little application. Should just take us a minute. We should have plenty of time. We can put it in this same solution. I'm going to collapse those down, and I'm going to create a new project. And this one is going to be a Windows Forms app. And let's make it be write to TXT, because we're going to write to a text file. I'm going to rename my program.cs because we've got so many in here. I do not want to change my file name extension. Let me rename that again. It didn't keep my .cs. So for this application, we're going to need to add system.io. Didn't actually need it in that one, huh? I'm going to go to my form. And let's create a nice application here. We're not going to have a lot. First of all, on our form, let's do some design work. Let's change our text property to say, I want it to be like this program sayings app. And then I'm going to set my back color. Yeah, there's like really dark. And then I'm going to do my fore color as a yellow. And I want to increase my font size a little bit. And then I'll shrink my form back down a bit. I think that's good. And then I'm going to open my toolbox and pin it. I want a label at the top. It's going to be like a heading. And so we're going to make this text property on this label say, enter favorite saying. Make it a little bigger because this is going to be a heading. Then we're going to have a text box here that's going to allow data entry. So I'm going to find a text box, put it on here. And I want it to be multi-line. So I'm going to find that multi-line property and change it from false to true. And I'm going to rename this text box. Let's make it be text box saying. And then I want a button. And my button is going to be named button store. And we're going to make our text property say store saying. And fix that back color bug thing. One more thing. Down at the bottom, let's have a status. label. We used a text box in our application that we're working on for our audio CD. We could also use a label. Now this label, I do need to name because I'm going to refer to it in my code. So I'm going to call it label message. I don't want to start out in my application with it being empty. So let's just have our text property say welcome. Looks good. Let's save it. So how we're going to have this work is our user's going to type in their saying, their favorite saying, like an early bird catches the worm. And then they're going to click store saying, and we're going to add that saying to a text file. Now it would be kind of nice if they didn't have to get to the mouse to click on that button. So I'd like to make it the default button so that if they press enter, that button's code executes. It's easy to do. I'm going to click on the form so that I'm looking at my form properties. And I want to find the property accept button. And I'm going to change that from none to our button. So our button has to exist on the form before we can set that. Now we can also have a cancel button. So a cancel button would be executed if someone presses escape. So it's kind of like resetting everything back to the default settings. So kind of like a reset button. All right, so that's good on our form we're set. Let's go to our store saying button code. So all of our code for this project is going to go into this button's event procedure. For our form though, we're going to go ahead and have some things happen in our form load. So we do need a class level variable on our form. And it's going to be a string writer. And we're going to call it FIL. Doesn't like it, huh? We need that system.io. Put it in our program file, but not our form when we actually need it, huh? Okay, so here we go. Now we've got our stream writer named FIL. And this one is going to write to a file. So it wouldn't be able to read from a file. It's really dumb. It's not going to be able to do both things. We have to be really specific. Now, before we can write our button store event, we need our form load event. So I'm going to go back to our form design and double click just a blank spot on the form to create that form load. I told you we're going to get a chance to do some try catch. So whenever we are working with a try catch block, we're saying, hey, I want you to try this code that's in my try block. And for this application, our code is going to be trying to set up our text file. And hey, I want to create this file saying.txt. Now, we're probably going to be able to create that file, right? I mean, the hard drive probably hasn't crashed. We probably still have access to the network. All of those great things that could keep us from being able to create that file. We should be good. But what if we're not? What if we catch some sort of error? What if we catch a directory not found exception? I don't know how to create that file. I don't know what directory you're in. If so, an exception object is going to be created by the system. And we're going to be receiving that exception object in our catch block. We're going to call it exe. In our catch block then, we can update our message and say, in our label message, set our text property to show that we ran into an error. It was invalid directory. And we can actually add the exception message to our code. So invalid directory plus whatever we get from the exception object's message. Now, what if we have an error, but it's not a directory not found exception? We could catch a different kind of error, like maybe a system.io exception. That means that we couldn't get to the hard drive at all. We got some sort of like error. It was bad. We don't like to see those. Well, we'll go ahead and refer to that exception object as exe and update our message. This time, whoops, we'll just set it to be exactly what the exception message text is. So let's put some comments in there. Try to set up the file. If there is an error, handle it in logic. So try catch. We're going to try to run this command, and if we can't, we're going to be examining what kind of error we get and doing an appropriate action based on that. Let's try to run this so far. Sorry. Do that every time, don't I? I can change it. Write to text. Start that. Okay, so far everything looks good. It says welcome. We didn't crash. We didn't get any errors. So we're all good to go. Did it create that file for us? Saying.txt. Let's go look. I'm going to right click on my project and open folder in File Explorer. I'll go to my bin, debug folder, and sure enough, there's my text file. It's empty right now, but it did create it. So since it's already created, will it give me an error if I run this again? Nah, it doesn't care. It's just going to reuse that same one. So now, how can we get it to update that file? We've got it created. Let's put our code in to update it. So whenever somebody clicks our button, we want to try to update that file. So we need to put everything within a try block. First of all, we're going to actually access our file object FIL. Remember, we created that at the top as a class level variable. And in our file instance, we have a lot of methods, things available to us. We'd like to write to that file, write a line. So just like we write a line to the console, we're going to write a line to our file. We want that line to come from our text box saying .text. After we write it, let's clear out our text box saying .text property. And of course, we could do that .clear. And then put our focus back on that text box. So if everything goes good, that should do it. We should be able to update our file and see the data out there and know that everything was good. But what if we run into some sort of error? What if somebody unplugged our flash drive or something? For some reason, we've lost that file system. The most common error we're going to run into is an IO exception. We don't have to always specify that type of exception, but in this example, they like to so that you're aware of what kind of error you might run into. Somebody unplugged something, hard drive crash, pretty unusual. We're going to take that exception message and run with it because we have no idea what might have happened. Okay, let's try running it. The early bird catches the worm. Store it. Did it store it? I'm going to look. My saying.txt file doesn't look any bigger. Can I open it? Can't see anything in there. It says it stored something in there. How about another one? A hard day's night. That's not really a saying, but you know, I'll store it. Nothing. Now I'm going to close my app. My saying text file is still just 0. It's not doing anything even though I'm writing to it. The reason is I'm never closing the file. So the updates are not getting permanently stored in the file. So we need to update our application somehow to close this file. Well, we don't really want to do it just because they stored some things, because they might type more things and want to save those. So we need to do it when they're trying to get out of the application. So let's look at our form design again. And looking at our form properties, let's go to our events. Now looking at our events, we have our form load, but what if somebody is closing the form? Do you see anything there that's an event? Form closed, form closing, leave. I'm not sure what the difference is. Let's see what leave says. Occurs when control is no longer the active control of the form. Oh, so that might happen a little bit more often because it could be interesting to test. They say we want form closing because our form is still open. We can still access our variables. So it's in the process of closing. So I'm just going to double click on form closing and have it create that event procedure. Did it work? Form closing. Now in our form closing, again, we're going to have everything in a try-catch. Try-catch must be implemented when you're working with files. This is where we really encounter unexpected errors, things that we can't possibly be programming for, network failures, things like that. So we're pretty dependent on the operating system to let us know. So we're going to try to close that file, but if we run into any sort of error, we don't even care what kind, we're just going to catch it. And we're going to say something, file did not close properly. So again, it would have to be a very unusual situation for us to encounter this error. The flash drive was in and somebody yanked it out right before we got done. Something like that. Lost the network. In general, our close should work. Now let's run and see if our data gets saved. store it. I'm going to look at my file. Still looks no different here. Let's add another one. Penny. This one always seemed backwards to me, right? Did you have to earn it before you can say? Anyways, okay, so I still don't have any difference. So now I'm going to close this form. And it should have gone through our closing process. And sure enough, now we have some data in our text file. I'm going to open it. Ah, and it's got both my lines. So great. How's yours? Everybody work okay? See everything? Let's try a little bit of a change then. We've got right now our sayings.txt file. We're saying just put it in the project folder. What if we try to put it into a folder that doesn't exist? Let's try, we're going to use the absolute string, the @ sign. We use our interpolated string $sign a lot before our double quotes, but we don't use the absolute string. The @ sign says, do not change this string. This is what it should be. We can use it instead of using escape sequences for our backslashes. So now I'm saying I want to create this file on my C drive in a folder named Bob. I don't have a folder named Bob on my C drive, so this should fail. So I'm going to run it. And here it is. Invalid directory, could not find a part of the path. So since my Bob folder doesn't exist, it gives us an error. So we got this error, we caught it in our catch code, right? Our catch code was executed because it was a bad file name. All right. That's a good spot for us. Next time, we're going to look at reading the file back in and using the file open and file save as dialog boxes that come with Windows. So we have a little bit that we can accomplish there looking at those. Before we end, I wanted to reopen the project that we were working on before your quiz, our audio CD form. If you saw in Discord, I sent out an updated version of the project. And I wanted to show this to you, make sure you understood. Whenever we created our project originally, we only had our add button, our OK button. And so we created a new this CD variable that's local. It was an audio CD data type called this CD. And when we rearranged our code, we kept this specifying the data type of audio CD. Well, that meant that anytime we ran this add method, we were actually creating a new local variable called this CD, and it wasn't the same this CD as our global class level variable. So our application would crash if we tried to add. We hadn't tested that after we'd made our changes. Bad. So we didn't realize. But all we had to do to fix that is take out this audio CD data type so that now we're referring to the global variable, our class level variable, instead of a local variable that's local just to this method. Does anybody have any questions about that? That problem, overriding the instance level variable like that, that problem can cause a lot of heartache. It can cause a lot of wasted time. So be sure you test through this application with the original code and with the changed code so that you see the difference, because it will just save you a huge amount of time if you remember to check things like that as you go. Okay, I just wanted to double check and make sure everybody saw that. We'll pick that up next time. Any questions before we go? Everybody's got everything. Make sure you help your study group people that aren't here. Encourage them to watch the videos. Working with text files is not super hard, but it can be kind of confusing when you first get started. So work with each other and help each other like you have been, and keep up the good work. You guys have a great day too. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.